Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today we are going to be looking at Glitch's upcoming Boardwalk collection. This is a massive 10-piece lineup in these pinks, purples, and blues in these shimmer, flaky, and jelly-based formulas, as well as 3 magnetics. So as always, I will save some more information on the launch details at the end of the video after comparisons. For now, let me just show you the swatches. The first polish we have is Strawberry Lemon Sorbet, which is described as a sheer peachy pink base with a pink to gold to green shimmer. This one, as you can see, is pretty sheer on the first coat. It just barely gives a wash of that pinky base color, but it is really packed with shimmer, and I probably should have showed this as a topper, but I decided to just build this up on its own because I loved the color in the bottle. This had a beautiful formula, just super smooth and easy to apply. Really even coverage. It self-leveled nicely as well, and it built up pretty decently on 2 coats where, don't get me wrong, it's still of course going to be really sheer. You're going to see nail line even after 3 coats, but I'm sure you know this kind of shade is just so up my alley. I think it's so dainty and I love the peachy pink color with the shimmers. I almost forgot to mention, this is also a glow-in-the-dark shade, so it does have a bright yellow-green kind of glow. Here's what that looks like, charged just under my phone flashlight for about a minute. It has a pretty decent strong glow. I also have the Make It Fast Quick Dry top coat coming out. It's going to be retailing for $8, and this is what I'll use over all of my swatches today. I found that it dried pretty fast. I still have to do a proper kind of wear test because, as I'm sure you know, when I do my swatch videos, I take off the polishes right away. So I haven't had a chance yet to see how this fully cures, if you know what I mean. And for my full hand swatches, I'm going to be showing 2 coats with the Quick Dry top coat, but since most of these are sheer, I also have a pink blurring base on my ring finger and a nude blurring base on my pinky, both from Polish for Days. The next shade we have is Sunset Boulevard, which is described as a warm neon pink crelly base with a bright gold magnetic pigment. You already know I gasped when I opened this one up. It is just so beautiful. Such a perfect summer shade because it's a really bright neon pink, but it's still a little bit in that mid-tone kind of range. And with the gold shimmer, it just makes it so warm, just really giving those hot summer sunset vibes. This had another really great formula as well. It applied like butter, just really self-leveling. I know it's described as a crelly, but I think I would call this one a jelly magnetic because it was still a decent amount sheer even after the 3 coats. You can still see my nail line, and it's extra apparent on 2 coats if you wear it unmagnetized or with the velvet effect as seen here. That being said, I still really love this one. I just really love the color. I thought it was so flattering. Again, that gold magnetic is just so striking. And for my full hand swatch, I have the glass bead on my pointer, velvet on my middle, cat eye on my ring, and unmagnetized on my pinky. Unfortunately, the glass bead did not really work with this one. The next magnetic we have is Poppin Bubbles, and this is described as a warm magenta with a pinky silver fine particle magnetic shimmer. So this is a much deeper berry color compared to the last shade, giving more of that late summer, early fall vibe. And yeah, this was another really beautiful one. A decent formula, it just wasn't as self-leveling on the first coat. I feel like you could see a darker streak on the middle of my nail, and I did end up having a little bit of a bald spot on the upper left hand corner, so that was slightly annoying that I missed that. But since this is a much darker color, at least compared to the last shade, I found that it was pretty much fully opaque on 2 coats alone. I think if you look close enough you can see a hint of nail line, but if your nails are shorter than mine, I doubt you would need a 3rd coat for this one. And I found this one also magnetized really easily as well, especially in the glass bead effect. Also, while this is described as being like a fine particle magnetic, I feel like it wasn't as glassy looking as some other ones, but maybe that's just me. Up next we have NBA Soap Opera, and this is described as a cool-toned purple jelly base with an orange to gold to green aurora shimmer. This is another absolute stunner. I just love how vibrant the shimmer is, especially against the purple base. I found that the formula was really nice overall, just really smooth and easy to apply. Not the most even coverage on the first coat, but it did even out on the second coat, so I think it is a lot more wearable that way. It builds up really nicely where you get a decent amount of that purple base color while still being a bit sheer, but I feel like the shimmer in this one is just so glowy that it just helps to distract from the nail line. At least that's how I feel. You know, I personally don't mind some VNL. You could also do a third coat to help obscure it a little bit more. It just intensifies that purple base even more. Or of course just layer this over a purple cream or a blurring base coat, which again is what I have on my ring and pinky fingers. While I think it looks nice over the pink, I think it really looks the closest to the shade on its own over Briar Rose, which is the nude color on my pinky. We have one more magnetic in the collection, and this is Coral Reef, described as a cool-toned purple jelly base with a magenta to gold to green shifting microflaky and a teal to blue to purple shifting magnetic pigment. So basically a double multi-chrome magnetic. The formula on this was really nice, pretty easy to work with, and had pretty good coverage on the first coat. It is like a little bit sheer, but there's a lot of those flakes in the background, so it builds up really easily. And since this is a somewhat of a darker color, I found that it was pretty much opaque for me in two coats. Again, if you look close enough, you might be able to see a hint of nail line, but I just didn't think it was necessary to do a third coat, and if your nails are shorter than mine, I really don't think it's necessary at all. But of course, you can do what you want. I imagine doing a third coat would deepen the base a little bit more as well, which I found it kind of hard to see underneath all of the micro shimmer and the magnetic pigment, but I would agree with calling it a cool toned purple because I just initially saw it as like an indigo color. And this one also magnetized really easily as well. You can see again the glass bead on my pointer, velvet on my middle, cat eye on my ring, and unmagnetized on my pinky. Then we have Equilibrium, which is described as a blurple jelly base with a pink to yellow to green shifting shimmer and blue reflective glitter. This one pretty much had the same formula as the other shimmer based polishes, where there's a decent amount of that pigmented jelly base. This one was also really self-leveling on the first coat, and it built up super beautifully in two coats. I wouldn't necessarily call this a darker shade, it's more of like a mid-tone sort of blue, but I found that it was dark enough that it pretty much obscured any visible nail line for me. So I actually left this one in just the two coats for my live swatch, but you could also just do a third if you want to make it even more full coverage. You'll see in a moment the two coats in direct sunlight is going to be pretty sheer, where the nail line is a lot more visible, so maybe I would wear this again in three coats, but I did love how this looked under flash. It is so gorgeous between that pink shimmer and the blue reflective glitter. The next blue we have is Brain Freeze, and this is described as a deep blue jelly with pink hollow micro shred glitters and pink reflective glitters. So while this looks like it has this inky or maybe midnight blue color in the bottle, on the nail it actually applies to a more cerulean leaning shade of blue. So it was a bit different than I was expecting, but it had a really fantastic formula, super pigmented on the first coat where it's not a super sheer watery kind of jelly, and it was very even coverage as well. I love the ratio of the little hollow shredded glitters in here, so I feel like this could be one of those polishes that looks great in 1, 2, or 3 coats depending on your preference. On 2 coats it does deepen up a considerable amount, and that's even truer for 3 coats. It does look a lot darker, but I wouldn't say the nail line is any more obscured, like maybe just because it's a darker color or just because there's more of those little hollow glitters, but it is a more glassy jelly, if that makes sense. So here I wanted to quickly show just my thumb next to the bottle. It's a very different shade of blue, and hopefully that's a lot more apparent in the sunlight shot, where again I'm wearing the 2 coats, which looks even lighter. The next polish in the lineup is Labradorite Dust, which is a purple jelly base that's absolutely packed with pink, blue, and purple iridescent shifting flakes. And they were not joking when they said it is absolutely packed. I feel like this one is maybe the most finicky formula of the lineup, where because there are so many flakies in here, you just might need to do a little bit more maneuvering. I found that this one was also the thickest formula of the bunch, but still easy to work with. But I imagine like the next time that I use it, I might need a few drops of thinner. But as you can see, it is really full coverage. It almost looks fully opaque on the two coats under my desk lighting here, but for my full hand swatch, I feel like the two coats still showed a little hint of nail line if you look close enough. So you might need a third coat if you want that more opaque, like full flaky coverage look, or just to deepen that purple base more. We have two more shades. The first one here is Infinite Baths, which is described as a deep blue jelly base with pink, purple, and gold iridescent shifting flakes. So at first glance, it might look like another flaky bomb, but it's not nearly as densely packed with the flakes as the last polish. I would say this has a more typical or expected jelly flaky formula, if that makes sense, as far as the ratio goes. So this one wasn't as thick as the last shade. It was a bit easier to work with, again, having a very glassy jelly base, most similar to Brain Freeze, for example, but with a deeper, more royal blue sort of color instead of that cerulean shade. So because the color was a little bit on the deeper side, I found that it built up really beautifully in just the two coats alone. I personally didn't think a third was necessary for this one. Even in direct sunlight, I feel like my nail line is pretty obscured despite there not being as many flakes as in the last polish. And finally, rounding out the collection is Bioluminescent, which is a deep blue jelly base with a green to blue shifting shimmer and a dusting of light pink reflective glitter. So since it's a shimmer reflective combo, it's most similar in terms of formula to Equilibrium, but obviously in a much more tealy blue-green sort of colorway. And this was also a lot more pigmented as well. I was kind of surprised to see just how full coverage it looked on the first coat alone, where it almost looks like some of the other shimmers in 2 or 3 coats, for example. So I found this one to be fully opaque for me in 2 coats. If your nails are longer, you might need a third, but I wouldn't expect it if your nails are shorter. And yeah, this is another super stunning shade, definitely captures the vibe so well. And while this is technically described as a blue base, I feel like because of that green shimmer, it definitely has a very strong teal color overall. And no surprise, I really loved that light pink reflective glitter in here too. And here is my full hand swatch collage of the Boardwalk collection, again in 2 coats each with the Make It Fast Quick Dry top coat. Definitely a lot of blues and purples in this lineup, but I feel like they are still pretty unique from each other. Now moving on to comparisons, we're starting with Strawberry Lemon Sorbet and looking at it next to Enchanted Peony and Pink Lemonade. Enchanted Peony is a much cooler toned and more pigmented crelly with a more subtle shimmer, so I ended up just comparing Pink Lemonade on the nail since these two could be like sibling polishes. They both have a peachy pink base, but the shimmer in Pink Lemonade is more finely milled and more pearlescent looking. From Hollow Taco, I pulled out Pretty Privilege, which was one of the magnetics from the Valentine's Day collection, as well as Pirouette Pink, which is a crushed hollow and very cool toned, similar to Pretty Privilege, but it does have this warm coppery shimmer, so I thought that would be a little bit closer at least. But obviously on the nail, it's just a little too white based and cool toned. Then from Cirque, I pulled out Slow Burn and Plush Suede. Slow Burn is more of a topper and it has more of this reddish pink shimmer color as opposed to the gold, while Plush Suede has a warm sort of coppery color shimmer. It's not really a yellow gold, and I feel like the base color looks pretty similar, at least when you compare them in the bottle, but on the nail, Plush Suede is a little bit more buildable and crelly leaning. So I think the glitch is kind of an in-between of these two Cirque shades. I have a handful of ILNPs to compare. The first two I thought of were Pixie Party and Opal Sunset. Pixie Party is a bit of a warmer toned pink, but it has a green colored shimmer, while Opal Sunset looks a little more similar in terms of the base color, but it's an even stronger yellow gold shimmer. I feel like the glitch has a little bit more warmth to it, maybe with like a yellow and orange shimmer. So I feel like the colors are slightly off, but they have a similar visual look. Then I also pulled out ILNP's Signature and Halo from their recent Socialite and Euphoric collections. I feel like the shimmer color in Signature looked a little closer, but obviously the base is much darker, so I only ended up comparing Halo on the nail, but the base in that is a lot more cooler toned, almost more lilac in color, and the finish is more flaky forward as opposed to a shimmer. Next, I figured I could show this next to Crack's Whimsy, which is their HHC polish for July, and I also pulled out Nailpollies You're One in a Melon, which I realize is actually kind of close to the Cracked as far as being milky pink bubblegum bases with these pink colored shimmers, so I would say both of those are closer to each other than the glitch, but the Nailpollies is a little bit more crelly leaning. And lastly, from Mooncat, I have Curse of Calypso and High Fructose. Sadly, neither are really that close at all. Curse of Calypso is very obviously faded, but it's still like a very light pinky shade, while High Fructose is a little bit more lilac in color. Next, for Sunset Boulevard, I had to show this next to Lovey Dovey, which is another bright pink magnetic from Glitch. That one's not a neon, and it also has this pink shimmer in the background, while the magnetic shimmer is silver, so definitely very different. For another neon pink, I have Act Up from the Pride collection. This one is a much more cooler toned shade of pink, while Sunset Boulevard almost has this corally pink undertone to it. I feel like on the nail they do look more similar than they actually are, not to mention Act Up has these aqua blue flakes. I actually think Sunset Boulevard is pretty close to an in-between shade of Crack's Cheeky Bottoms and 90 Degrees, so you can see it is a bit coral leaning, but still a hot pink. Lastly, I have these two KBShimmer polishes, neither of which are neons or magnetics, but they kind of have that warm, corally hot pink base color with a strong gold shimmer. So on the left is Picture This, and on the right is Rock the Float. I guess between these two, I would say Rock the Float is a little closer just because it's a little bit lighter, but again, not really as bright or neon. Next, for Poppin Bubbles, I first pulled out ILNP's Be Mine, but that's more of a raspberry red kind of color, so I think the closer shade that I had was Hollow Taco's Flirt Alert, which looks extremely similar in the bottle aside from the hollow flakes in Hollow Taco, but on the nail the glitch is a bit darker, more of that magenta berry color, while Flirt Alert is a little bit more jelly leaning and red toned. For reference, here is Poppin Bubbles next to ILNP's As If and Hollow Taco's Dockside Drama, which are much brighter in comparison and more pink and purple respectively. So for a darker sort of berry leaning color, I then thought of ILNP's Adored from a previous Valentine's Day collection, and I feel like it's definitely extremely close color wise. It's not an exact dupe, obviously missing the magnetic, but I think it's just a little bit darker. Then from NBA Soap Opera, I thought the closest glitch that I had was Keys to the Kingdom, which I know obviously looks very different because it has a purple shimmer and hollow, but I think the bases are somewhat close. For other purple shimmers, I pulled out Polish for Days Eternal Glow, but that has a much brighter purple base with a red shimmer. And then I remembered Mooncat's Take Me to Your Leader, which has or had a purple base and has a strong coppery orange shimmer. Unfortunately though, my bottle has severely faded, so it's kind of a grayed out lavender. It's not that original purple color, which I think the glitch looks close to, so hopefully this one won't fade. And lastly, I figured I could also show this next to ILNP's Fairy Dust, which has a purple base and more of a coppery orange red shimmer as well as hollow sparkle, but I think the base is a little cooler toned or just a little lighter overall, so I would say these are from the same family but not dupes. Then for Coral Reef, this immediately reminded me of ILNP's Flipside or Holo Taco's Playing the Field, which technically have the same kind of multi-chrome shifts. Those two are closer to each other though than Coral Reef. Even though they technically have a pink sort of background shimmer, it's a little bit lighter in color, I think, in Glitch, and that one also has a more flaky finish. For Equilibrium, I figured I could first show this next to The Smell of Rain, which is another sheer blue, but it's a blue shimmer in more of a pearlescent kind of finish. I actually think it's a lot closer to Dream Opal, which I sadly recently destashed. So while I think those two might look incredibly similar in the bottles, I think on the nail, Equilibrium is a bit darker, not to mention it also has the reflective glitter. And here is Equilibrium next to Protect the Dolls from the Pride collection. It is another blue base with a pinky sort of shimmer. That one is a magnetic, but the bigger difference is the base color being a lot lighter. So for slightly darker blues with that pink shimmer, I pulled out Mooncat's Mercury's Tears and Cirque's Heart of Glass. And again, I would say these are all from the same family, but not exact dupes. The Mooncat is a little bit lighter in its base color and the shimmer is a lot more shifty, while the Cirque is a lot darker in its base color and it also has hollow. And here is Holo Taco's Blue Rizzler for comparison. This one has a similar blue base with like a pink shimmer, although it is a crushed hollow, but I feel like visually they kind of have a similar look. The big difference though is just the base color in Holo Taco being a bit lighter or brighter and the shimmer not standing out as much. I would guess that ILNP's Pool Party is pretty similar to Equilibrium, but maybe it's a bit brighter in color, again because Equilibrium is a little bit more dusty or muted. For Brain Freeze, I really struggled with this one. I think the closest shades that I had to this were Mooncat's A Galaxy Far, Far Away from the Star Wars collab and Fauve's Provocateur. In the bottles, like they kind of have a similar vibe, but on the nails, they just do not compare. Though I guess technically between these two, the Mooncat is a little closer, just having that blue color with the flakes. And since Brain Freeze has such a prominent blue jelly base, I figured I could also compare it next to Crack's Bloop and Starry's Bluefire Jelly just for color reference. So I am showing 2 coats of each, and I feel like these make a perfect gradient in terms of their level of pigmentation. So the Cracked is the most sheer, while Starrily is the most pigmented. It honestly looked like a closer dupe on one coat, and then I figured I could try to recreate Brain Freeze. So I did a sandwich with CX Polish's Icy, which is a hollow topper. It has reflective glitter. So I did 2 coats of the jelly base, 1 coat of Icy, 1 more coat of the jelly, and then on top of that was Holo Taco's Purple Flake Taco. And honestly, I feel like this is a pretty good combination. Finally, for Labradorite Dust, I was so curious to see how this compares to May Flowers from the groundbreaking collection. It's a super gorgeous iridescent flaky mix with blue and purple, but it is a lot lighter looking. I guess to be fair, May Flowers is more of a topper, like in a clear kind of base, so I did layer this over 2 coats of Cirque's Eros Jelly, but that was just a little too light, so for a more pigmented purple, I did 2 coats of Starry's Crown Jelly, but I feel like the flakes still don't look the same as in Labradorite Dust, where the blue just stands out so much more there. For other iridescent flaky toppers, I have Crack's Fairy Tinkle, but that one's more rainbow in its color mix and with more pops of green. So I thought Prism's Heart Like Marsha is a bit closer with that more blue, purple, pink color combination, but it also has these hex glitters in there, so it just gives it a different visual look overall. For other super packed flaky jelly polishes from Glitch, I have Mito from the Palestine collection, which is a more tealy green base with a rainbow colorful mix. So I think the closest shade is Avon from the most recent Pride collection, which looks like it has the same flaky mix, being that blue, purple, pink combo, but it's in a gray base instead of purple. And again, the flakies just kind of don't look as prominent as in Labradorite Dust. And for reference, here is Prism's Fang Teas and Apocalypse's This Is You, No More Hiding, which are some other intense flaky packed polishes, but they're in more purpley indigo base colors and they're just not as packed with the flakes as Glitch's. And lastly, I have Hollow Taco's Don't Be Jelly, which is another purple jelly base with aqua blue and pinky red flakes, so kind of similar colors but very different looks. Actually, real quick, I figured I could show Labradorite next to Brain Freeze again, since they kind of look the most similar in the bottles, being these flaky bomb polishes, but again, Brain Freeze just doesn't have nearly as many flakes. So I think for that one, the shade that I immediately thought of was Mooncat's Cosmic Cowboy, which has these pink iridescent flakes in a blue jelly base, but that's a little too light. So we again are bringing back Starrily Bluefire Jelly. Since I thought the base might be a little bit closer to this, I would say it is in terms of the level of saturation, but Brain Freeze has maybe more of a true royal blue color, so I figured I might as well layer Cosmic Cowboy on top of Starrily, and it kind of has a similar vibe, but it's missing more of the dimension of the flakes. So then I also added Crack's Fairy Tinkle on top of that, and I feel like it looked a little closer, but it's not an exact dupe. And finally, for Bioluminescent, I first pulled out Garden on the Beach and Heart of the Ocean from Glitch, which were kind of the closest that I had, but they're on different sides of the spectrum. Garden on the Beach being a more teal color with a pink shimmer, and Heart of the Ocean being more blue. Since Bioluminescent was more of that teal green, I thought of Mooncat's Drown My Demons, which has that green magnetic shimmer in a blue base. I was expecting these to be a lot closer than they ended up being. The shimmer in Mooncat is a lot more green, so it just looks a little more teal in Glitch. So for reference, here is Starrily Pluto and Cracked Polish's Fight, which are other tealy, green, blue kind of colors, but again, they just have more stronger green shimmers, so I would say both of these are a little closer to Mooncat. And then I remembered Mooncat's Poseidons Prize, which is another magnetic, but it kind of has more of that blue teal leaning color, though it is a few shades lighter than the Glitch. I think it's most noticeable on the nail here, where the base just isn't as dark, but the shimmer looked really similar. So we again are bringing back Starrily Bluefire Jelly to deepen the base. So I did 1 coat of the Mooncat over 2 coats of Starrily, and it's pretty much spot on. It's just missing the reflective glitter. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of Glitch's upcoming Boardwalk collection. These are going to be launching on Friday, July 17th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And as a reminder, I'm an affiliate with Glitch, so if you want to support me and my channel while shopping these or anything else, I'll have my affiliate link and discount code YOGI10 in the description box down below. Also, as an additional reminder, I'm going to be donating all of my July commission from Glitch to Covenant House PA, which provides housing and shelter to youths experiencing homelessness, trafficking, and other injustices. So if you do want to also support that, make sure to use my link or code, or I will have them linked down below if you want to just check them out yourself. Back to the collection. I mean, no surprise, I really enjoyed this lineup. This color palette just speaks to me, even though, admittedly, it does look a little familiar to some previous Glitch lineups, or polishes rather, like the 2 pinks, the flaky bombs. But as you saw in the comparison portion, they are different enough, at least in my opinion. And I know that I am a little bit biased towards these because, again, they are just in this color palette and finish that I just prefer. But yeah, overall, I think my top top standout is going to be Sunset Boulevard. I just thought it was so stunning. I feel like we haven't really seen a pink magnetic like that before. They usually are darker or just a cooler tone, more of like a traditional hot pink color or like a dark berry pink. So to see this warmer toned hot pink with the gold shimmer, it is just such a perfect summer shade. And like I mentioned before, while there are kind of a lot of like blues and purples in the lineup, some of which look kind of similar to each other, they do end up looking quite different on the nail, which was really nice to see, because again, just seeing the initial lineup, I was like, okay, this is really like blue heavy, but some of them ended up being more purple on the nail. Obviously they have their different finishes, even though some of them do have like similar jelly bases or they have flakies in them, they still are different enough. So aside from the pinks, I feel like it is hard to pick a favorite from the blues because they just have their own different elements that like make them shine. So I'd love to know your thoughts on these down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!